We're off to a great start today. Um, but yeah, I wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our Knowledge Assistant Masterclass. So this webinar is going to be focused on prompting that gets results. Before we fully jump into the framework, I wanted to give you guys a mental shift that really changes everything. So most people are thinking about AI as asking better questions, and just getting information, and it's not really. It's about giving better instructions. So I like to think about it as delegating to a very fast, very capable intern. The intern can do almost anything, but they need to know what they're doing. They need that clear direction. So if we ask vague questions, we're going to get vague results. And that's the whole game, right? And so today's session is going to be practical tips that we can use. And hopefully by the end, you're going to walk away with a good formula that you can use immediately to start getting those good results. So my name is Shelly D'Antonio. If we haven't met before, I'm the Director of Solutions here at HOA. I work day in and day out with teams that are implementing and optimizing HOA and other AI initiatives. So everything we cover today is grounded in what I'm actually seeing with our management companies and with our other clients. So here's what we want to cover today. So we're going to start with the prompting problem. So this is why most people aren't getting the results they want and how we can look to fix that. And then we're going to walk through a simple four-part framework here, apply it with some specific formulas and look at common mistakes on how to fix those. And then we'll open it up for QA. We'll try to move at a good pace. So if you have any questions, please drop those in the Q&A, and we'll go through those questions in the end. And then if you're interested in learning more about HOAI, please just drop the word meet in that Q&A. All right, so let's start with something most of us have experienced. If you've ever gotten a response from HOAI or really any of your AI products that you're using and thought, that's not quite what I meant, this whole session is really around how do we improve that and how do we fix that. So we don't want generic results where we have to try again and again. And at some point you're wondering, like, why am I wasting my time here? Um, like, why am I going through this? I could have just done it as easily as myself. The thing is, the gap isn't the technology. The gap's how we're instructing and communicating with the technology. So if we want to get in, like, if we get inconsistent results, when we get vague prompts that are going to lead to wildly varying outputs, different formats, things like that. And we're wasting time on trial and error. So when we give a vague prompt, it's going to require us to give it more and more information, iterate on it multiple times, and it really defeats that purpose of saving time. Um, and so those better prompts are going to get us better results. So wanted to talk through this example here. So put in a prompt, write an email to an owner that has repeatedly have trash cans violations. So we all have those owners who refuse to take their trash in past day of pickup or leave it out for multiple days, don't hide it behind the fence the way that they're supposed to. With a prompt like this, we're going to get an inconsistent message and we're probably going to get a really long-winded message. So this prompt results in a message that had a very lengthy message, had a ton of technical detail and bullet points, and really no clear call to action for the homeowner. And we know homeowners aren't going to read these messages if they're long, and lengthy. So we try a different prompt. In the second prompt, we're saying you are a community manager, a homeowner at 813 Pine Forest Road. So we're giving a specific address here. Has a trash been visible from the street 3 weeks after a first notice? So a little bit more context here for the AI to know what to work with. We want a firm but professional second notice message. We want to keep it under 150 words. Include the next step if not resolved in 7 days. So with a prompt like this, where we're giving an extra layer of instruction for our agent to deal with, we're going to get a clear and succinct result. So we had a much more concise message. There was a very brief governing doc blurb and summary there to let the owner know why they were not able to have that trash can out past day of pickup or what that violation was really about. And then a very clear call to action about what the owner needed to do for that. Um, so with this, we just get a much better result without having to find the result from the original message and then say include a note to remove the trash can in 7 days and like shorten the bullet points on the violation covenants. So instead of us having to go give 3 or 4 different instructions to the agent, we were able to just give one instruction and get a perfect response. So let's talk about a simple framework for better response. Um, we want to, we call this the 4 Ds. So delegation. So before we even type a prompt, before we even start, we want to get clear on the goal. So what are we trying to accomplish? Like what's our job versus the AI's job? So drafting the homeowner letter, yeah, we want the AI to do that, but making the final tone, call on the tone for a sensitive situation, that's our decision, right? And then for the description, this is the actual prompt for AI. So this is telling the AI what we need, how to approach what we need, and what role we really want it to play. The more context here, again, is fewer iterations. So we want to specify the what, the how, and the role. With this description, often setting the audience is very, very helpful for making sure that we're getting the best output there. And then we get into discernment. So we want to evaluate what we get. So this is where we really want to read critically through the output that the AI is getting us. We want to ask ourselves, did it follow our instructions? Is it accurate? Is the reasoning sound? Does it match the right situation? Um, and making sure that it's doing what we asked it to do. And then finally, diligence. And this is, I think, one of the most important things. You're always accountable. Like we're accountable for the information that goes out, whether it's a board, whether it's an owner, whether AI wrote it or my assistant wrote it. We are responsible for these messages. So we really need to do the diligence to make sure, are we protecting that sensitive data? Are we transparent about the AI use before we send it? And just making sure that it is a solid response. Um, because the AI, it's not our compliance officer. We can ask it to to make sure that it checks for things, but it's not going to flag things like legal risk or sensitive data unless we ask it to. Um, so we want to make sure that we're really being diligent on the output of what we're getting with that AI. So these 4 skills are going to apply every single time we're using AI, whether we're drafting that homeowner letter, whether we're summarizing a financial report, preparing board meeting minutes, any of these use cases, these 4 Ds will help us make that better prompt. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual mechanics of building the prompt. And I want to give you something simple and repeatable. So we're going to have a formula that we can start using today. So this formula has 5 key points: role, context, task, format, and constraints. So let's break down what these are. Role is telling the AI who it is. So this helps shape its tone, its expertise level, its perspective. So this is where, say, you can tell the AI you're a senior community manager, draft a note to a homeowner XYZ, or as an accountant for a community association XYZ. So kind of giving the AI the role of who it is helps kind of shape that great response there. The context then is what is giving it what it needs to know. So this is any data that you need to give it, the situation, any background information. So this is where maybe we're going to paste in some information that we have on meeting minutes. If we're summarizing something, we're giving it that context to work with. Now, HOAI is going to have a lot of context on your associations already when you're using that. So I'm not saying like, hey, go post your pool guidelines in there. Like that's already there. But what we're going to do for context here is refer to my pool guidelines specifically, so that the agent knows what context it needs to go get. Task here is being specific about the ask. So we want to be very precise, not general. This is where we can tell it what kind of format we want. Like I want, um, oh, I'm sorry, jumping ahead. So that is being specific about what we want here. So I want a summary of the financials. I want a letter to a homeowner. I want a communication out to the entire association. And then format is where we're getting into what we want that output to look like. So is this a table? Is this a paragraph? Is it a list with bulleted points? Is it a letter? So we're really kind of defining what that is. And with that, we're really giving it that tone too. This is where we can say what we want that to do. And then constraints is where we're setting guardrails. So this is where I can say, hey, I want this note back to be under 200 characters. Or I want this to be in a very professional tone or a very casual and friendly tone. I can tell it that as a constraint, I want it to be defined for a non-financially savvy board member. So kind of giving it that audience. Also, we're giving it what to avoid here. So avoiding certain information that we don't want it to do, avoiding using any overly legal language, things like that. So when we get into role plus context plus task plus format plus constraints, um, we're getting a much more reliable output every single time. So let's take an example. Say we're prepping for a meeting. A weak prompt for that meeting might be summarize this document for a meeting. You're going to get a very generic paragraph. It's not going to be very helpful. You're probably going to have to iterate on it, or you're just going to chuck it out and go write that meeting summary yourself. Something that is stronger is if you are an executive assistant preparing for a board meeting briefing. So I've given it that role. Here are the meeting minutes from last month's board meeting. So I can paste those in, or if you're working through one of the meeting action items in Vantaca, we've got that context there. So that's giving us the context. We want to summarize 3 key decisions made, any unresolved action items, and flag anything that requires a vote at the next meeting. So we're giving it that very specific task of 3 key decisions, unresolved action items, flagging anything that needs a vote. And then we're going to format that as a 1-page bullet summary with headers for each section. So we're giving it that format that we want. And then, whoop, getting ahead of myself here. And then what we're really going to see with that um, is having all of that in one prompt. The output is something that I can actually take right away and give to a board member as is. Maybe I want to tweak a little thing or two, but it's pretty much ready and set to go. Whereas that weaker prompt is going to require several unnecessary iterations for us. All right, so let's look at this formula in action. So here's another example. We want to do a variance report for the board. So think about the last time you did this. Every piece of the prompt is something that you already knew. You just hadn't structured it right. So what we want to do here, again, another example is we're giving it a role. You are a financial analyst for community management company. We're giving it context. Here is the Q4 budgets and actuals um, for Maple Ridge HOA. And so you can attach that data. Again, with HOAI, what you'd really want to do is say, go look at my Q4 budget and go look at my Q4 income statement. So because that context already exists, it's just one less thing that you have to paste in for context there. And then as that task, to create that variance analysis summary highlighting the top 3 overspend with likely root causes. we give it some, so we've got that very specific task of what we want. And then we've got the format. So here's what I want that actually to look like. So instead of having a paragraph that I then have to go format or having just a bunch of text on the page, we've got a nice table set up with those three columns. The constraints here under 500 words. So this is where we're making sure that AI isn't getting too chatty and keeping it nice and short. That plain language for board members, and then flag any variance over 10%. So again, we're kind of putting constraints over what we want that output to look like. So that's the formula. If you notice, if you want to use this every month, you just swap out the data and the community name, and you've just built a reusable system. So with these prompts, we can kind of get the context down, and then we can save those prompts and just start switching out the pertinent information in order to really speed this up. So another thing, I really love this. So most people think that AI means starting from scratch every time. A real power move is the opposite. It's to take something that already exists, already works, and then use AI to turn it into a repeatable system. So every company, I know all of you have these things out there that are gold buried in your files, great emails that your managers wrote, reports that just perfectly nailed it, made your treasurers happy, proposals that closed deals when you were trying to get new business. That knowledge is just sitting out there in your knowledge bases within your organizations. So this technique is going to help pull it out, make it repeatable, and it means your best work becomes kind of the baseline now for everyone's work instead of just, single wins. Um, so what we do with this is um, use those existing kind of pieces of gold to help us build those repeatable processes. So as some examples here, violation letters. Here's a second notice that got a compliance without a complaint. Break down the tone structure, firm versus empathetic moments, build a reusable template. So this would then produce out the kind of the guidelines for what made that letter great. So the next time we need to go create one of those one-off letters, we can say, hey, use this framework to for this letter, include this additional information. Um, Another example here, board reports. So a monthly board report that got great feedback, identifies structure, what data it leads with, how it frames bad news. Love that bit because nobody likes to deliver bad news. And then create that repeatable outline so that you can use it every month. And so from that prompt, we're going to be able to take that prompt, we're going to be able to kind of paste it in, change up what month is different, what we want the new information to be, and then really get that solid board report every time. Homeowner welcome emails. So this is another example. What makes effective welcome email from a top community? We want to be able to love this line, customize in 2 minutes. So kind of giving it that instruction of give me a framework where I just have to plug in 2 or 3 pieces of data and then we're good to go. Vendor RFPs is another really great way to do this of um, showing the AI what a good vendor proposal is, and then the way it frames that scope, that cost, build a template that they can use. Having this as a perfect framework is a great way to then take RFPs that you're receiving from vendors and compare them against that, identify things that are missing from the RFPs that you're getting, and help kind of build out the questions that you can send back to your teams. And then team trainings, so that's a good one. I know we do this all the time of when we're training our new teams of here's a good training portal. This is something like a good training session that happened. Identify what was good about it, and then give me a skeleton I can use so that next time we have to train a set of staff, we kind of have that right framework to be able to do that in the future. Um, all right. So moving on. So One thing people ask a lot that I've heard is whether they should always use kind of that full formula for the prompts. And the answer is really it depends on what you're trying to do, right? So we're not always doing the same things. So we kind of talk about open-ended prompts and then we talk about structured prompts. So open-ended prompts are really great when you're exploring. You don't really know the shape of what the answer you want is yet. So this is good for things like brainstorming. What are some ways that we could um, do things? So for instance, help me think through how we should handle owner disputes in the community. So that's a good open-ended prompt to kind of get a little bit more, kind of treat AI a little bit more like a thought partner. And then we have the structured prompts, and that's when we really want to execute. So these are best when we know exactly what we want the output to be, and we've got the context and the data to do that. And so that's really where the full formula pays off, um, is when we know when to use these open prompts and when we want to use these structured prompts. All right, so couple power moves. So once you've got the formula down, couple extra moves that make kind of take it next level. So the first, ask for three options. So instead of saying giving it all those the context and the audience and the constraints there, ask for three versions, maybe like strict, balanced, and friendly. So instead of having to get a version and go like, I want that to be more friendly, we can go ahead and have that in one set of choices instead of just having a single draft that we have to iterate on. I do this all the time. Tell AI to ask you questions before answering. So I'm constantly going to Claude and saying, this is a thing I'm trying to do, giving it the context, giving it the information that it needs, and then saying, ask me anything that's missing. So that it knows so that it will come back and ask me, like, what are the gaps? Like, I'll give you a better answer if you can fill in the context of these kinds of questions. And then using AI as that reviewer. So we want to have really strong prompts so we're not constantly iterating, but it is always great to use the AI to review the drafts that we're getting for a little bit of extra context. So in this example, review the response for legal risk and tone issues. So you're using it to create, and then you're using it to critique what it's created. Chain your prompts. So you don't have to do everything in one shot, especially when we're doing that brainstorming, information, things like that. We want to first summarize the situation, and then we want to draft the response, and then we want to refine the tone. So maybe we have to go through those three steps, but in each of those steps, we do want to make sure that we're providing all of the right definition, the right tasks, the right um, constraints and things like that there. And then finally, we want to give it examples. So this is similar to what we were doing with the reverse engineering. AI is very pattern based. And so if you give it an example and say, match this style, or I want it in this framework, the AI is going to sound a little bit more like you. It's not going to sound as, AI and robotic. All right, we're gonna hit this real quick because I know we're getting short on time. I'm gonna make sure that we've got time for that Q&A. Um, so let's talk about what goes wrong with AI, because we've all been there. Oop, my slides keep going back. So one, output is too generic, so we've already talked about that. We want to add that role, audience, and format. AI misses the point. So that's where we want to restate the goal in a sentence. So the goal is to help a board member understand why we went over budget, and then go back to your prompt. So really kind of giving it that goal in one sentence just to make sure that it's not going to just go off on its own and come up with something. If it's too long or short, that's where those constraints come in. And hey, I want 3 bullet points. I want 200 words. I want 5 paragraphs. So making sure that we give it that instruction there. And then when the tone feels off, giving it that performance description, giving it those three at the same time as we talked about so that we can get 3 different outputs to compare if we want to, is also super helpful. And then AI makes things up. So AI hallucinates, fact of the matter. So making sure that you're saying use only what I've provided with HOAI telling it, look in the association additional info, look in the documents, and making sure that it's using that information, and it's not just going out and grabbing general information about the community industry. And then if the output is close but not right, just iterate on it. So that's where you want to tell AI what to change and why. So this is similar to doing your modifications on your workflows is you're telling it what like why did like what you want changed so that it can go through and kind of correct that out. Um, all right. So briefly putting it all together, we want to delegate. So this is our get a clear idea of what the goal is, decide what AI handles, what you're going to handle, describe. So in your prompts, you want that role, context, task, format, and constraint. You want to discern. So this is again where we're evaluating that output, making sure that we're refining with whatever feedback that we need to give the AI. And then diligence. So again, we own this communication for for better or worse. So we want to be make sure that we're diligent and make sure that we've got eyes on what's going out. And every time we use this process, it's going to get faster. So the first structured prompt, it's going to take a while, right? You're thinking about the right things. You're thinking about what needs to be included. The 10th one that you do, it's going to take 30 seconds because you've really built that muscle by then of what that context needs to be. All right, so I've been chattering a lot at you guys really quickly. We will move into Q&A here. If I can find the Q&A. So question, what do you mean when you say be transparent about AI use? So this is a question that we get a lot of, we hear it a lot with HOAI voice of do I need to announce when my voice agent is answering the phone that I'm an AI agent? I am not a legal advisor, so talk to your legal advisor, but the answer is no, not really, but you don't want to be secretive about it either. So, for instance, the voice agent will not necessarily prompt that it is an AI agent unless that's the instruction that we give it, but it does often respond back in the affirmative if it's asked that question. So we've heard sample phone calls where it says, "Hey, are you a human or AI?" And the agent says, "Yeah, I'm your virtual agent helping to answer your questions. Like, what can I help you with?" Other ways to be transparent about AI use is making sure that your boards understand what your interaction with AI is. So boards are can often be a little um, I don't know, hesitant, I guess is a good word to use about um about the use of AI. They're worried that AI is going to go off the rails and things like that. So sharing with them how you're using AI, how AI is helping you help them, is always a really good practice. All right. So unfortunately, we are at time, guys. I am sorry I did not save too much time for Q&As here. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy day to spend half an hour with me. I hope you found something useful in this session. Again, if you're not with HOAI and you have questions about HOAI, drop the word meet in that Q&A chat and the team will be sure to get out back out in touch with you. And otherwise, have a wonderful day out there, y'all.